All right. Good morning, everyone. So good afternoon to people joining from Europe, and good morning to those joining from America. I'd like to say welcome to our webinar. My name is Dee. I'm joined by Constantin Klyk and Antanas Karbauskas, and they'll be doing this webinar. So I'll go through quickly some introductions. If I can go to the next slide. If we go before, so just really quickly, we're from Solarplaza. We organize lots of events worldwide, and this webinar is, in the lead up to our conference on the 18th of September in Paris. So that will be a conference that we're doing, and we're also going to go to some practical details. So the slides, you will get it at the end of the webinar. And if you have any questions, if you go to the top right, there is a chat box. So you can just put all the questions that you have. I will receive them, and at the end, I will ask them to our speakers. And if you have any technical issues, please use the Q&A chat box as well. And again, all the slides will be able, and the full recordings will be at the end of the webinar, so you won't miss anything. So we're going to talk about the latest developments in Agri-PV for dual land use, and this is a photo that I asked ChatGPT to put together. So the prompt would be, how would it look like if we succeeded in scaling Agri-PV across Europe? And this is quite of a nice picture. And we're going to discuss perhaps how we get there and in the conference. And today is a little teaser to get everyone excited. So I'm sure our colleagues will talk about what Agri-PV is, but in its most simple terms, it's just a dual land use solution for agriculture and solar energy generation. And why? It is a way for us to future-proof our food system and meet our renewable energy targets with limited land availability. So in the coming decade, Agri-PV projects are forecasted to make the jump from megawatt to gigawatt scale. And the European Union is at the forefront of this with the CAP project, which is really interesting. And we have Antanas to talk about that. And I will share the agenda. So I've done the introduction. Now we have two really interesting presentations. First, we have Constantin Klyk talking about agri-photovoltaic market trends. This is something really interesting that we should know how the market is going and predict where it can grow. After that, we have Antanas Karbauskas, who will talk about agri-photovoltaics in the EU, to talk about the CAP legal framework and the member state decisions and potential future work. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Constantin Klyk. He is the founder and independent consultant of Agri-PV Consulting. We've worked together in the past before. He has a lot of focus in Agri-PV systems. He used to be a project and product management at Zimmerman, and now the lead author of his first dedicated Agri-PV book in Agrivoltaics. So we're really excited for that to come as well. Constantin, I give the floor to you as well as the microphone, the PowerPoint controls. The floor is yours.
So yeah, thank you, Dee. Thank you for this nice introduction. Still not, now I get the control. And now I can switch the slides. Not yet. Okay, so yeah, hello and welcome to everyone. I'm happy that you attended. I'm happy that you're interested in this topic of agri-photovoltaics. And I will be speaking about market trends, about potentials, and about what is driving these market trends today. First of all, Dee already introduced me. I'm a mechanical engineer. I have just founded my own consultancy on Agri-PV, so I have a very strong background in Agri-PV. I'm at the moment fully focused on this topic. So if you are having interest in this, please reach out to me. The rest of the introduction on me I will skip, as Dee did it already. Let's jump right into the topic. And first of all, let's have a look at what is the current state of agrivoltaics. We had in 2022, these numbers are a little bit outdated, a market value of around $4 billion US. And this is already quite a number. It is forecasted to grow to almost 11 billion by 2030. But to be honest, these are numbers I found from Allied Market Research. I am quite sure these numbers are too small. So I am really sure we will have a much stronger growth, and I will tell you why I think we will see this very strong growth over the next 10 years. First of all, let us have a look at the Agri-PV potentials. I separated into three different categories in which we can well divide the agriculture. First of all, horticulture, then the arable land, and permanent pastures and grasslands. All these numbers are calculated on land use of 1% of the world's available surfaces that are in this typical category. So if I'm speaking about horticulture, we have a number of 1.7 terawatts, means that all the horticulture in the world, the surface of that multiplied with the energy density that is possible for horticulture. We see horticulture has quite a big energy density. I think the picture below shows us it very well. We have very dense photovoltaic modules, but if we would have standard modules in this density, we would be somewhere at 1.5, 1.6 megawatts. Usually in horticulture, we have some semi-transparent modules to make sure that we get enough light to the plants, which gives us this average energy density of 0.8 megawatts per hectare. Still, as I said, we have a quite big potential of 1.6 terawatts. With arable land, again, you see in the picture, we have usually a row of PV modules. It can be a fixed or a tracker or 2P trackers, but then usually we have quite a big space until the next row because we have big machinery. If you're thinking about wheat, for example, we have big full harvesters with working with 12, 15, some up to 25 meters. So this makes it necessary to have quite a big distance, and this reduces the energy density quite significantly. So the average is somewhere at 0.4 megawatt. But because of there is in general so much of surface available, we get to 6 terawatts again with only 1% of the available surfaces in the world. And the biggest potential lies in permanent pastures and grassland. Here we calculated with an energy density of 0.7 megawatt. Usually the machinery is smaller. Often we don't need machinery at all. If we think about animal husbandry, then we can have a much denser Agri-PV system. And as the permanent pastures and grasslands is the biggest category of land use in the world, we get to this astonishing number of 25 terawatts on only 1%. And this is really important. We only calculate 1% to get to these numbers. So we see two maps. Let's concentrate on Europe first. We have already quite a big spread of agrivoltaic. And I think for most of the people, actually, it's not so much in their minds that all these projects would be categorized agrivoltaics. For many, it's just this really few projects available. What is included in these projects is solar grazing with sheep. And this is, I know it's a topic where many are arguing, is it really Agri-PV or is it just a PV plot where we have a cheap ecological lawnmower? But in my opinion, why should it not be Agri-PV if grazing sheep is agriculture? Why should it not be Agri-PV if we combine it with solar power? So yeah, we have, especially over Western Europe, we have a lot of projects. If you look at Spain, most of these projects are actually solar grazing. Around Germany, Switzerland, there are mainly horticulture applications. So this is what is happening in Europe. If we are looking at the US now, it is a similar picture. Most of the really big projects that are there are either solar grazing, mainly with sheep again, but in the US also pollinators are categorized as Agri-PV. So we see these nice little bee symbols. These are all PV parks with special measures to promote biodiversity and to promote the livelihood of pollinators. In total, we have around 3.5 gigawatts of agrivoltaic projects over the US that are included in this map. This map has been put together by NREL, and the other map I showed on Europe has been put together by Solar Power Europe. So, what are the key market drivers at the moment? What we really see, the incentives that are being in place in some places at the moment. Just very recently, Germany increased the incentives with Solar Paket 1. Italy just published their PNRR rules, and these both are really great examples of how the incentives can boost the agri-PV. As in Germany now, of course, there are some rules. You cannot do anything to get the higher feed-in tariffs, but if you stick with these rules, which is the very main number is the height of 2.11 meters. Of course, there is more to it, but this is one very important factor. And you can really get up to 9.5 cents for your kilowatt hour. And of course, as you can imagine, compared to a typical PV project, again, Germany, the last tender, the highest value was 5.5 cents. This is almost double. And of course, this makes it highly interesting for any project developer to think about what can we do to build the agri-PV to get the higher incentives. And this is, let's say, pushing quite a lot. Italy is another great example with their PNRR rules, where they go even a step further. So you get quite a big support for your capex. So if you stick to these rules, you can get a big amount of money upfront and additionally get incentives for your kilowatt hours. So this is, let's say, there is a little bit of a gold rush going on in Italy at the moment. So at the moment, the tender is open, and it will be open for 2 months. And of course, all the project developers see their big money in these projects and see that they can increase their income by going to Agri-PV compared to a standard fixed tilt or tracker solution. So the legislation, yeah, it's strongly connected to the incentives. So it's pretty much controlling how do these projects look in the end. And one thing that I really want to accept here again is solar grazing. You see it on the picture on the right, as this is one part of agrivoltaics that is not driven by incentives. In both Germany and Italy, you would not get the incentives for a park like this. Yet still there are the most capacity is installed in solar grazing, as it's just basically the people build it as solar grazing before they even know what is agrivoltaics. So this is really an exception. We don't need incentives here to make it an agrivoltaic project. And some other exceptions are horticulture, which is much, much smaller, but still we have more and more farmers that say, I want to protect my crops. Of course, it's nice that I get some money out of the PV, but my main motivation to build this project is protect my crops. And this is also outside of the incentives, makes it even more attractive if we include the incentives. So, market challenges, beautiful picture on the right. It has nothing to do with Agri-PV, but for everyone in the PV sector, you should know that this is quite a challenging situation for a PV park. What are the biggest market challenges? Mainly in many markets, still there's a lot of uncertainty. So especially how is Agri-PV categorized? What is about taxes is often a big topic. Am I taxed as a typical PV park, or am I taxed as agriculture? And yeah, Agri-PV is neither nor, it's a mix and doesn't really fit into these legislations, making it difficult. Of course, we have higher costs in an Agri-PV, especially thinking about high elevated systems in horticulture, but high elevated systems over, for example, cows. Of course, going in the height is expensive. Thinking about crops, we are really missing a lot of data. So there are many projects, but these projects are not generally um, valid for, or the data that we generate from these projects is not generally valid for all the other projects that are around, because you can imagine if I have some data from the south of Germany on how apples grow, it's probably not valid in Spain anymore. It's not valid in the US because the climate is very different, the irradiation is different. So this makes it quite difficult to generate valuable data, and as there are not so many projects yet, it's just a problem that this data is missing. And another point that is still there is the missing knowledge transfer. So there is a lot of knowledge on the topic in general, but it is not spread so much. It is mainly available in Central Europe and in the US, some in China for sure, in Asia in general, but for example, let's say in Africa or in South America, there's a lot of knowledge missing. And yeah, not only there. So also to tell you, this is part of my mission to increase this knowledge transfer, to bring the knowledge that I have gathered to the people who need it, to spread up the to increase the spread of Agri-PV. So this is already the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box. I think next is the presentation on the CAP, and in the end we will answer your questions. If you scan this barcode, you can follow me on LinkedIn and connect to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Constantin. And now we have our next presentation by Antanas Karbauskas. He's a policy officer from the European Commission, the DG Agri unit, and they're responsible for the EU CAP program, as I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And he has worked with this program for over 6 years. And now he will take you through some of the latest updates and things to look out for on a European level. Antanas, I'd like to give you the floor.
Thank you, Dee. And hello to everyone who are on the other side of the screen, whom I don't see at the moment. Yes, I'm Antanas. I'm working in the European Commission as they already have presented to me. So saving the time that we have, I will go further with my presentation. I would like to go to the next slide. Okay, now it works. So what I want to discuss with you, to present you today, is the common agricultural policy and how the very interesting topic of agrophotovoltaics fits into here. So again, I will want to briefly present you what is the CAP, so in the abbreviation, Common Agricultural Policy, or in abbreviation CAP, as we shortly say it. What are the main principles there? How the support is granted to beneficiaries? What member states actually do with it, and then yes, what is the future? What is the future of Agri-PV? What we see it, what we now are doing on it, what are the points we are considering currently? So having said this, I go to the next presentation, to the next slide. Sorry for technical issues, but
I think if you click the screen twice, it should be okay. Because I see you have control. Is it working?
okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
perfect.
No, it's fine. Yes, so to be quite quick, not to lose time, I see that we have quite a little time left today. To leave it for the conference, of course, that's the key point here. But yes, in DG Agri, so Directorate General for the European Commission, which is responsible for agriculture and rural development, how do we see agrophotovoltaic? So first of all, to say that we don't have a clear-cut definition of what is Agri-PV. Nevertheless, it's quite clearly understood that the main principle here is the multiple use of space for agriculture and energy production. Surely it can have various shapes. For example, it can have solar panels on the farm stables, farm barns. But what we are most interested in, and what are the main topic of the discussion here today, and also overall, when we speak here about Agri-PV in DG Agri, is the application of solar panels, photovoltaics on agricultural land, where we have agricultural activity and energy production at the same time. Why it is important? Because I myself work on the common agricultural part, which is mainly about direct payments, so paying support to farmers for agricultural land on which they perform agricultural activity. So surely when you have photovoltaic, another element on your agricultural land, that raises the questions of support. But for that, I would like to go then to the next slide, and yes, just to show you briefly again, on the cap we can talk really a lot, but just to see the main principles as we have it currently at the moment. The current cap is based on the three big main objectives: economic objectives, the three objectives here, the climate objectives, climate, environment, biodiversity objectives, which are here, and the social territorial objectives, which are the blue ones. So so my specialization is mainly about direct payments, so which is aiming to support farmers' income. So it is this one, ensure farm income. And when it comes to other cap objectives, the environmental ones, and especially actions related to climate, there we see possibilities of supporting installations of Agri-PV to promote sustainable energy. At the same time, when you come to social objectives, we see an example objective on promotion of circular economy. So within the vibrant rural areas objective, because we want also livelihood in rural areas, sustainability of rural areas. And here actually, maybe I already mentioned one of the instruments that are available within the CAP is the knowledge transfer, awareness, and knowledge transfer. That we have really interventions for example, for advisory services that could really benefit for transferring and knowledge and rising awareness on Agri-PV, which was one of the points that I just saw in Constantin's presentation. Okay, now I'll go very quickly. The main instruments, what we have in the CAP to support installations of Agri-PV. So not going now into detail into, let's say, different options available there. Just it will be available in the slides that will be at disposal for you. But the point is that main focus is on installations for the on-farm use. It's true that there is opportunities also to support installations which would aim, let's say, also to selling electricity to the grid, for example. But in those cases, it would be some more restrictive, more additional criteria would need to be met, like state aid clearance, so some additional rules. So shortly about the installations, what is possible, let's say, what the CAP provides as a possibilities. Yeah, so what we actually see, what member states actually do in reality is that in many cases, so we see 21 member states is really providing support from their rural development fund really to within the CAP to fund installations of renewable energy. But at the same time, what we also see that the information provided by member states is quite general. So we see that only in 5 cases in 5 member states where it is explicitly mentioned that there is support for agri-photovoltaic. In majority of other cases, it can be more general support for installations of solar energy, wind energy, hydropower, and other renewable energies. But their Agri-PV could be also supported there, but we don't see that directly from member states' plans, what they plan to do exactly. But what we can see clearly that the dominant principle of the support provided for installations of these renewable energies focus on farm use only. In some cases, we see that it's also for outside of the activities, but those are more rare cases. And probably also to mention here that if we see under all member states, so we have 27 member states, just to be precise. Sorry, maybe I was going a bit too fast looking at the time available, but just to be clear that we have 27 member states, and each of those member states are establishing their CAP strategic plans, so decisions that they will do within their agricultural policy within the EU legal framework. And there, yes, we clearly see that member states decide to support mainly farmers for the internal use, and the total capacity of all renewable energies to be installed within the period till 2027, that's the plan, is about 1.5 gigawatts. So compared to all renewable energies, what we have now in Europe, what are the targets? So this is surely not a big numbers, and probably can be further improved. Yes, sorry if I can go back. Oh, sorry for technicalities, but yeah, I think I missed few slides. What I wanted to say. Yeah, so what I did not to mention yet. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, but it's I don't know. Really sorry, but yesterday it went really
Oh,
well.
good.
With one
Okay.
click, I go to a next presentation, and here something doesn't work for me. I think with 2 clicks I jump directly, or
Yeah, we
but
can jump to the slide that I think it's like just keep clicking forward and then we will get there. We have a lot of questions coming in as well. So if you guys have any questions specifically, please add them to the question box on the right. So while we go through this, and then we're compiling the questions, and at the end, we will discuss all of them. So I think it's going to be a good discussion indeed. And also, I guess the attendees get to rewatch the whole presentation too. It's quite interesting.
okay, now it seems to work already. With a
Yep,
single click, I can go to next slides. Okay, that's already.
it's all good.
Okay, so I see that I missed a bit the slides, but the point is that
Hmm.
what the key message I wanted to deliver here is that when it comes to direct payments in the common agricultural policy, so the main principle is that it is a support for active farmers who are doing an agricultural activity on the agricultural area. An agricultural activity has to be predominant activity, and the land has to be at the disposal of the farmer, of the beneficiary. Now, this point is very important because through direct payments, we have majority of the CAP support being granted to farmers. So in precise numbers, we have about 40 billion euros, which are paid to farmers, to about 170 million hectares in the EU, for the performance of the agricultural activity. And now, very important here to mention is that it's for the member states to define the land-related rules and the farmer-related rules. And here, I would like really to emphasize that in the active farmer and the predominant activity. So if I go to the next slide on this one, yes. So what member states actually do, I see that in most of the cases, when it comes to land-related eligibility rules, so the predominance of agricultural activity, because agricultural activity has to be a dominant for the land to be eligible for direct payments. We see that in most member states define it in rather in a general way, that if there is a non-agricultural activity, it should not affect the soil, it should not affect the crop vegetation, and it is fine, this is enough. So in this case, it would mean that if there is Agri-PV installed and it is not affecting the soil, not affecting the vegetation, it should be eligible. So land under installed solar panels should be continuing receiving direct payments as before, while we have only 2 member states, Germany and France in particular, they make it more explicitly that the areas, I think the main rule is that areas with PVs are not eligible for direct payments unless it is an agri-photovoltaic system. And in those cases, it's already further defined in the national rules. So in their 2 cases, they see clearly that Agri-PV areas with Agri-PV still can continue receiving direct payments like normal areas without PVs, without photovoltaics, and this is further defined in their rules. Then on the farm-related rules, also very important here to stress, and that's what I would like to emphasize, that support should be granted to active farmers only. For active farmers, we have a general framework in the EU regulation But the point is, it's for the member states to define the precise rules. Who is the active farmer? And one of the criteria could be that the active farmer is a farmer who is getting a minimum share or certain share of his income from agriculture in the total activity of the farmer, of the beneficiary, of the group of beneficiaries, whoever it would be. So in this case, one could say that if a farmer is getting most absolute majority of his income from energy production, for example, then one could say that it is not an active farmer anymore. But at the same time, again, this is for the member states to define criteria. And what we now currently see in the member states plans, what they do until 2027, is that indeed there are 12 member states who include the income test criteria within the active farmer, but in most cases it is an optional criteria, and it's only in 2 member states regions. So in Greece and in Belgium, Flanders, where the income test is obligatory for everyone who is receiving more than 5,000 euros in direct payments. So really income test is so far, it's really little used, but yes, so here it's really for the member states to decide what criteria to use. And here the main message is that a lot of the Agri-PV as such could be supported. There is no restrictions in the cap that the areas under Agri-PV would be ineligible if agricultural activity is dominant. It should be in principle eligible, but it is for the member states really to make their decisions, their support decisions, how the support should be granted to farmers. Because here, I think from our case, it's also very important that we want to see support being granted to farmers and for the sustainable use of the land, for sustainable agricultural activities, while really recognizing that solar power could in many cases improve farmers' income. We see many nice examples. It can improve even sometimes biodiversity, protect from hail, from shadow, and so on. But what we see, it's a lot still case by case. Okay, so I see we are running out of time, so I would just, let's say, very quickly emphasize that we are closely looking at the development of Agri-PV. We are discussing with member states what is happening there. We see developments in the member state national legislations, also what Constantin was presenting. We do also some studies to see what is the optimal land use. And when we speak about the future, indeed, we must look at the different angles. So what we want is surely a continuation of sustainable agricultural activity, food security, farm income is very much important. At the same time, we are clearly aware of renewable energy targets, emission reductions, reduction from dependency on fossil fuels. But at the same time, it's also respecting what I would also like to emphasize here. It's also very much important for us to respect member states and regions, their power in deciding how to use the land. Because from our side, okay, we can have legislation how the CAP, Common Agricultural Policy funds, should be used, but at the same time, land use, which is outside of the CAP, could be outside of the CAP. It's still for the national, regional authorities to decide. And with that, sorry, maybe I took a bit too much time. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but I don't know if we still have time for some questions.
We do for sure. So I'd like to thank you for your presentation, and don't worry about the technical difficulties, it's still super interesting. I'd like to invite Constantin back as well to do a little Q&A. Constantine, perfect. All right, so we have a lot of questions, and you can see we are all here with our little Agri-PV backgrounds, me with my ecological mowing lawnmower. So we have a really first question, and maybe this one could be for both of you. So Till is asking, does the EU want a common definition for Agri-PV and support with one framework? So maybe Antanas can answer that, but then Constantine, you can reflect on, do we need a common definition for Agri-PV? And I think that would be interesting.
Yes, thank you for the question. Indeed, this relates to my last slide, where I put all the challenges, let's say, and all the important points that we have to look at. So that's really the question now, also for the future development. What do we want at the EU level? At the same time, we see different approaches among member states, already different definitions in place. So there is various aspects here, not to hamper some developments with too narrow definition maybe. So we really need something sustainable that is, yeah, clearing the path for sustainable future and encompassing, let's say, different objectives, different levels of social objectives, climate objectives, environmental objectives. So yeah, I mean, the reply is that we are looking into this, but we are looking very carefully, not to let's say, to make some different unwanted waves, making something too narrow or maybe not noticing something.
Okay. Constantine, do you think we need or if you think we should have a shared definition, what should it be, or a shared framework? Oh, you're muted.
I think it is very difficult to have a shared definition, and if we would have it, it could be only really, really broad. The agricultural practices around EU are very different. From the south of Italy or Spain to the north. So to put all of these practices into one definition would pretty much for sure exclude something somewhere. So I think it is, yeah, not really necessary because we could only, yeah, I think it would be very, very difficult to make a good definition valid for everything that could be agrivoltaics in some of the member states.
All right. And then another question, I believe also to both of you on your expertise. Zoe asks, which countries are launching or planning the most projects that you know of? Based on what you said, I'm thinking Italy, but.
Well, at the moment, Italy is a very hot topic. We are right in the phase of the tender, where they invested 1.5 billion or are planning to invest 1.5 billion euros. So there is a lot of projects on the rise now. But I think there's other countries like France where a lot of projects are built without the real background of agrivoltaics, but still we could consider them as agrivoltaics today. But I think, yeah, for sure, Germany, Italy, France, these are probably in the next time the hottest markets.
Andres, do you agree?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I have nothing to object to what Constantine said. I think he said very, very clearly these things. I can just add that indeed, what I also noted during my presentation, that when we look at the CAP strategic plans and what member states do within there, it's quite low capacity that they plan to install, let's say, with the help of the CAP funds, with the EU Common Agricultural Policy funds. So I believe a lot of those projects, what also Constantine has mentioned, is done now based on private financing, based on some other financing from other EU funds, from other national funds, but probably most of them are outside of the Common Agricultural Policy frame. No, that's how I would imagine.
Yeah. Okay. There's one specific question for you, Antanas, which I think you already more or less answered, but this person wanted to know what is defined an active farmer, but you said so far there's only one criteria, but up to the member states to introduce their own. Maybe you could share a bit more on the expectations.
Yes, of course. Well, active farmer, well, if I say it according to the legislation, so active farmer is the one who is engaged in at least minimum level of agricultural activity, and this minimum level is to be defined by a member state. And one of the criteria how to define this minimum level could be income test, so that it is tested that the majority of income or some share of the income comes from agriculture in your total income, but it can well be other criteria. So some member states require a minimum number of animals, minimum number of area, so being registered in specific type of farm
Yeah.
register, having agriculture as a main objective. So it's really a different list of criteria. I can just add that initially the objective was that to support those farmers who are really living from agriculture, who make their living out of it. So full-time farmers, but also there are other objectives in the CAP as vitality of rural areas. So
Mhm.
definitely you can have part-time farmers who are important in rural areas. So yes, but overall it's really those who are doing at least some level of agricultural activity. Yeah.
Okay. And for Constantine, we have also a very specific question. And for my colleague, that's slide 12. So someone is asking, when you say 2.1 meters, do you mean the hub height for a tracker, or do you mean the distance between the bottom edge of a panel and the crop?
Well, actually, it's the distance between the bottom module edge in the maximum inclination, if in case we have a tracker, to the ground.
Okay.
So this is how, at least in Germany and Italy, these 2.1 meters are defined. And I think in these two countries, it's the most important.
Okay. There was also a follow-up question. So someone asked, oh yeah, you addressed it as well in Italy, right? The question about solar grazing as well. Oh, I will ask it. So it's another specific one where, so in Italy, in order to consider solar grazing as agri-PV, the ground clearance must be set in 1.3 meters. And do you think it's still considered if the ground clearance is 50 to 80, like in the case of normal trackers, because they say the sheep don't really need that height, if they can fit underneath?
Yes, it is true that sheep can fit underneath 50 to 80 centimeters, but these heights, how they have been defined, I'm not sure how it was defined in Italy. I have not been involved in this process, but I have been involved in the German process there. And there, it's not only that the animal have to fit under there, but it's for other comfort reason for the animals. Also, it's for working reasons for people under there if something is happening. And of course, you can build a solar grazing plant with a lower height, but then you just not get into these rules, and hence you cannot apply for the incentives that are out there.
Okay. So we have, I believe, one final question because I know we're cut for time, but there's just so many. And this one would be for the both of you, and it's quite a long one. So if you can, I will read it, and then you could try and yeah, respond to it. So does an agricultural practice slash activity have to be performed and active in the same way on the area of a farmer's property leased for a PV plant as for the rest of the land as the farmer is using for agricultural practice? So for example, if the farmer cannot have the same access to the PV plant area for agricultural production as for the rest of their land, let's say except for sheep grazing. So is there a recommended ratio of how the farmer's land is used for agricultural activity versus the area that can be PV? So what I'm thinking they're asking is if the farmer has its own farm and then they have some part that becomes like utility scale and they don't access it except for the sheep, does that count as agri-PV? Maybe for both of you to think this is more of a theoretical question, I think.
It's a little bit confusing, this question, but if I understood it correctly, I would say yes, it counts.
Okay.
You can use a part of of course, you don't have to use all your surface that you have to put Agri-PV if you decide to go for Agri-PV. Anyway, it's not wanted that anyone uses all his area. It's at least again in Germany, it's limited, and yeah, I don't see why it should not be possible.
Antanas, does it count?
Yeah, again, it's I was trying also to understand what is the situation here, but I mean, from the support perspective, I mean, I can answer from the support perspective, so that indeed some land can be remain fully agricultural without any PVs, some can be with PVs. So it's surely for the farmer to decide how to organize his fields, whether land with agri PVs is still meeting this, whether agricultural activity is still predominant activity in this land of PVs. Again, depends how member states define it, but if the agricultural activity is perfectly done in the whole parcel there, probably should be fine. But then at the same time, for the active farmer, again depends if member state requests all farmers to pass the income test, and then depending what is the income from energy production for such farmer, is it only on farm use or is it outside to sell to the grid? So many different criteria here to be seen. What is happening? What are the member states' decision? What are requested by the farmer? Yeah, case by case. In this case, I would say.
Okay, so I guess the verdict is it is Agri-PV. I don't want to close it on this question. I kind of want to ask a final high-level one. So someone asked this, both, I guess, for Constantine, what technical economic trends do you expect in 5 years' time? And maybe the question could be also for Antanas, what legal/European level trends do you see happening in 5 years' time? And we can maybe close off with a bit of a future outlook. Antanas, if you'd like to start.
Yes, what legal trends, legal framework trends do we see in 5 years on Agri-PV? No, but well, so in this case, from 5 years, we are speaking into 2029, 2030, something like that. Well, this cap is let's say this program is till 2027. So for the new cap, yes, discussions are starting, but we are not yet in the Commission proposal. So so to be seen what is there. As well, I also take note what Constantin has said that the common definition of Agri-PV in the EU is a bit dangerous given the variety of different systems and the potential to miss something, let's say. So yes, I would say that we are closely look into it, mm, and and yeah, we will see what happens. I think what should be clear from my side that we are definitely not looking to completely exclude solar from agriculture. That for sure we don't want, because we see many potentials here and a lot of synergies. But how it
Okay.
will develop, what is the legal framework, it's difficult yet to, it's early for me to say on
All
that.
right. But many potentials and good synergy. Constantine, if you'd like to give us
Yeah,
your
so
forecast.
technology, what will it be? It's very hard to answer as it's strongly pushed by the legal, actually, by the legal framework. So what is a great example is the German market and the tracker, and tracker that is adapted to Agri-PV, but not very high elevated. So around 2 or 3 months ago, I would have said, okay, for sure the predominant technology that we will see here is the tracker, probably 1P tracker over cow husbandry or as interspace tracker, because the adaptation of the technology is quite small compared to a typical PV system, which means that it is quite cheap. But now we have the new legislation, Solar Paket 1, and in there the tracker is excluded from the incentives. So if you build an Agri-PV plant with a tracker like this, where your minimum height from the ground is not 2.10 m, you cannot get the incentives. And suddenly, instead of 9.5 cents, you get something between 4.5 and 5.5 cents. So suddenly it's not interesting anymore. Suddenly maybe a vertical system gets more interesting, which is inside these incentives, even though it's similar expensive than a tracker and gives you much yet less yield. But in the end, what counts for a project developer is really what can I earn at the end of the day. And if suddenly the vertical system earns you more than the tracker, through the incentives, we will see more of this. But what I want to say, it really depends on how does it develop. Will we get incentives after the round that are announced now? Then we will really see what is inside these incentives. If we don't get incentives anymore, I would go back and say, okay, we will see the tracker. It's the cheapest option that gives us a very big yield, and hence it's the most economic system that is out there.
Okay. Thank you both for your future forecasts. I look forward to breaking it down maybe 5 years from now. We still had a few questions, and for those that we weren't able to get to, we will put out an article at the end, or I will connect some of you with the speakers. We got more clarification on the farmer question as well, so I'll put you in contact, and we will answer that on email. So in the line with incentives, both of our speakers, Antanas and Constantine, will be at our event in Europe in person. And to thank you for joining the webinar, we have a discount code. So if you'd like to continue the discussion, we would love to see you there. And for now, we've had a very exciting talk. We're over time, but I'd like to say thank you to all of you who are still here. I think everyone still remained for the questions, which is really great. So thank you both to Antanas and to Constantine for sharing their knowledge and for all your questions. And have a great Tuesday, I believe.
Yes,
It's
Tuesday,
right?
Yeah, thanks for organization, and
Thank you.
see you in Rome, hopefully every one of you.
Paris.
Not Rome, Paris. Last year it was Rome.
Yes.
Sorry.
See all of you in Paris signing off. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.